However, the short-lived reign of the RMC came to a dramatic end on the morning of October 25, 1983, when 500 airborne Rangers and U.S. Marines landed at the Point Salines Airport at the southeastern point of Grenada.
Welcome to Resilience of the Spice Isle. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. Our last episode ended with a discussion on the events that occurred at Fort Rupert on Wednesday, October the 19th, 1983. At this stage, the island of Grenada is in a crisis situation. There is great uncertainty. Many questions are being asked, but there seems to be very few answers, if any at all. How are the Grenadian people responding to this uncertainty? Well, Richard Simon is at this time a broadcast journalist with Radio Free Grenada. He finds himself in a peculiar position. He is scheduled to report for duty.
It was very hard for me because I had to actually take work that evening at Radio Free Grenada. I called them up and said, "Listen, I'm finished. I'm done. I'm not coming to work." And the person at the other end of the line said, "You're on shift. You have to come to work." And I said, well, I'm not coming to work. I'm finished with that. And I hung up the phone. And I understand sometime later that they sent vehicles with armed soldiers to find us who were workers at RFG. So this happened, and that was the end of my work with Radio Free Grenada, as it were, at the time.
Coming out of this, country's on shutdown, can't go anywhere, curfew, shot on sight if you move.
I think we stayed inside for a couple days before then the next announcement came that Kodanim was in charge, and then this next minister came up and said what is going to happen. People are going to stay inside, and if you come from outside, and you're going to be shot on sight. And so most scared now. You know you can't go outside.
Anyone who seeks to demonstrate or disturb the peace will be shot. An all-day and all-night curfew will be established for the next 4 days, from now until next Monday at 6 o'clock. No one is to leave their house. Anyone violating this curfew will be shot on sight. All schools are closed and all workplaces except for the essential services until further notice.
When you are dealing, as it appears, as we are told, it is the Revolutionary Military Council that is in charge, I am not sure, I don't altogether agree with Francis that Bernard Cord may be calling all the shots. It may be that he is contributing significantly to decisions that are being made, but I believe that the military may be acting on its own in a whole lot of matters, and this is the frightening aspect of it. I believe, therefore, that has to be, their being in charge must be ended, and I believe that the very important human element in the whole situation has to be dealt with. Like, for example, I believe that for the time being an amendment in the whole curfew arrangements is something that has to be pressed for, because as some of us know Grenada, there are certain ordinary things that people can't do. Their water facilities are outside of their houses. Some of the other personal amenities are not in the same building where they live, and to make a curfew in that way is to be very insensitive and inhuman.
How do the people have any confidence in you at all as leader to maintain and to run the country? Okay, you put them under, following that, 3 days of curfew in their buildings. First time in the history of Grenada, nobody's been to church because they're not allowed out of their houses on the Sunday following. And all of this is now speeding through the Caribbean.
And then there was a period where there was a kind of almost an attempt to settle down. The country was kind of getting accustomed to this new norm, that nobody could quite make out what exactly was going to happen next. There were obviously Cuban construction workers here working at the airport. So there was a lot of political ramifications and international and regional complications to what had happened. Nobody knew which side, if there was an issue, which side they would come down on. Nobody knew in this revolution whether or not there would have been the rising of a Gary element back in the process. By this time, Gary was now in the US and could not come back to Grenada. Some people were rejoicing that finally the revolution has fallen, Bishop was killed. That was mainly the Gary faction. That kind of look what they've done. On the other hand, you had persons who were saying, well, it's not our time to rule because Bishop was not doing what he was supposed to do, and he wanted joint leadership with Cord and all the rest of it, and it was a very confusing period, for me anyway, in Grenada. And so that period of uncertainty between the 19th and the 25th was very impactful for a lot of people because they were now almost called upon to take sides because you were not sure if you said anything negative against the current rulers, what would be the situation.
What is the position of the people in power now? I mean, they are in a peculiar position at the moment. What kind of position are they in?
It's not a peculiar position at all. Bernard Cord planned it that way. Cord's personality, his characteristics, smell of two characters in history, Stalin and Hitler. Now, the press is saying that you're not hearing from Cord, and therefore he may not be in charge. But that does not follow, because Cord is quite satisfied with living in the bush. He doesn't have to be out. He's not a social animal, Cord is not. He's not like Bishop. Bishop has to be out and around the people. But Cord could stay in the bush until the end of the earth, and he will pillage the country from it. And therefore we must not be misled by his undercover operations into believing that anyone other than Cord is running the country. And that is the way he likes it, so it's not funny to him. Now we have put forward, therefore, certain proposals. It seems to me that there are...
This is the Grenada Democratic Movement.
The Grenada Democratic Movement. There really are two issues here. First of all, there is a sensational one, should there be foreign intervention?
Which you've called for, is that right?
We have called for foreign help, yes. There's no point being Sunday schoolish about this. People are being confined to their homes 4 days in succession. They may not have been storing up for this occasion. And you're going to tell them they can't come out onto the streets, their own streets in their own country for 4 days? One cannot accept that Cord or Austin has any such authority to do that at all. It's just not acceptable to us. And in that context, much as we generally deplore foreign intervention in the domestic affairs of any country, the realities surrounding this Grenadian situation forbid us to pretend that we are totally against foreign intervention. As a first stopgap, we would prefer if the Commonwealth Caribbean countries could come in one way or the other and sort out the situation. If that does not work, then I am afraid, will have to look further afield. We in the Grenada Democratic Movement are committed to that. That is not a matter for compromise with us.
As far as the intervention goes, I believe that it is important that the people of the Caribbean intervene. This is why the CCC has called for the CARICOM governments to consult urgently on the matter, because some intervention there is required. And I believe that it is not necessarily military intervention, but not only something being said, but some kind of approach needs to be made. However, and the trouble is, I believe many of us don't know who it is we're supposed to approach.
What happens after, of course, is US invasion intervention. The two words I used because there are different views on how we look at this.
We have to put the Grenada Revolution in the context of the Caribbean Basin and the role of the United States and the Monroe Doctrine. It was the Cold War, and then President Ronald Reagan had campaigned on reclaiming United States preeminence in the world. Remember, President Carter, before him, was thought to be weak by many Americans who wanted to see American power used in a greater way in the world. Grenada became a pawn in that struggle between the United States and the USSR. To my mind, it was never about Grenada. It was making a point during the Cold War to the USSR that this Caribbean basin, based on the Monroe Doctrine, is our backyard. So some people say it was an invasion, others say it was a rescue mission, others say it was an intervention. Some scholars are now saying it was an intervention. It depends on how you were affected by the events at the time. If you were imprisoned and you were released when the United States forces came, for you, it was a rescue mission. If you're a scholar of international security and you're trying to understand international law and questions of sovereignty and small states and hegemony, you would say it was illegal based on international law. So there's so many ways that we could try to dissect this. The facts are, the United States came into Grenada, a small country, sovereign country, and on October 25th, 1983, they declared war.
The controversy comes, of course, with how it happened. Yeah? So, of course, the U.S., as we mentioned before, had all their reasons why they weren't happy with Grenada. And this is now a perfect opportunity to get this socialist situation out of the way.
The governments of our islands have been forced to consider unprecedented situations, and ultimately, some of us have agreed on seeking logical and necessary but unprecedented solutions. We have attracted the attention of the world in a stark, indeed a violent way, far removed from the familiar pattern of Caribbean tourism and industrialization, services and social welfare, hard work and enterprise that has comprised the main interests of our governments for 20 years and more. Well, how has all this come about?
By that time you have Tom Adams, who is on board. You have, from 1980, you have Siaga up in Jamaica, and they just have this intense concern about where do we go from here.
You have CARICOM, you have OECS, and some decisions needed to be made.
Thursday, the 20th of October, I was telephoned by Prime Minister Compton of St. Lucia, who expressed himself in the strongest possible terms that the situation in Grenada could not remain as it was, and he proposed that there be a Caribbean initiative to intervene in Grenada on a multinational basis to restore law and order and to lead the country to an early election. He emphasized that the entire Caribbean should be invited to join and then should seek assistance in effecting our purpose. I agreed, and later that day, the Cabinet of Barbados decided to support a multinational intervention in Grenada after Caribbean leaders had had an opportunity of discussing the situation and of jointly initiating action. To Prime Minister Compton fell the duty of requisitioning a meeting of Caribbean heads of government. He telephoned Prime Minister Chambers of Trinidad and Tobago, the current chairman of the CARICOM heads of government, and asked him to summon a meeting of the heads in Barbados. Prime Minister Chambers did not consult me, but summoned the meeting in Port of Spain instead. Some confusion ensued, as in fact most people were summoned for both places. And since a telephone call to Trinidad for me to speak to Mr. Chambers was not received, or at least not returned, it was only on Friday, October the 21st, that Trinidad was finally selected as the venue. The OECS countries and Jamaica, however, all came to Barbados on the Friday, that is October the 21st. And during that day, I saw the diplomatic representatives of 4 countries. I first saw the High Commissioner for Trinidad and Tobago and explained to him, in confidence for transmission to his Prime Minister, that I would be unable to attend the Caribbean heads of government the next day in Trinidad, since a military intervention in Grenada was being contemplated by the OECS with Barbados and other countries, in which the participation of all CARICOM countries would be invited. I told him that my presence would be absolutely necessary in Barbados to conduct negotiations with countries taking part, and also to take such decisions on the military details as fell to the chairman of the Defense Board. At 12:30 p.m. on that day, I saw the British High Commissioner and told him also what was contemplated and that Britain would be invited to participate. I next saw the United States ambassador and told him the same thing, and that an invitation was likely to be extended to Britain. He undertook to convey the facts to President Reagan while awaiting a formal request should one be issued. At 5 that afternoon, I saw the High Commissioner for Canada at his request and discussed the situation in Grenada generally. He gave me the views of his Prime Minister, and I responded. Although it had not been contemplated by those of us who had discussed the matter that Canada would have been invited, in deference to the outstandingly close relations of Canada, Barbados, and the Caribbean, and of the very high regard which I have for Prime Minister Trudeau, I did tell the High Commissioner that my view of the Grenada situation was that the only solution was a military intervention. That evening, the OECS, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with Montserrat, held a meeting. First, a formal meeting of their ministers of defense, and then a meeting of their governing authority, and unanimously agreed to invoke Article 8 of their Treaty of Association and to seek the assistance of friendly countries to stabilize the situation and to establish a peacekeeping force. It is important to note that neither Grenada nor any Eastern Caribbean country, including Barbados, although members of the Organization of American States, are signatories of the 1947 Rio Treaty, and that the OAS is therefore ruled out as a peacekeeping body in our immediate area.
The OECS would have met, but without members. Some members were absent. Barbados and Jamaica would have joined in, even though they're not part of the OECS. And a petition was made to the US to help the situation in Grenada.
I was requested to attend the OECS meeting and issued with an invitation for Barbados to participate. I agreed within the terms of our cabinet's decision. Troop numbers were settled, and the staff of the Regional Security Organization, of which Barbados and most of the Eastern Caribbean states are members, were deputed to do the necessary military planning. I was then deputed by the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States formally to notify Britain and the United States through their local diplomatic representatives of the decision and to make known our wish for their participation in the multinational force. Later that evening, Prime Minister Eugenia Charles and I met Prime Minister Siaga of Jamaica, who on behalf of Jamaica accepted the invitation to participate, and jointly we formally invited the participation of the United States of America through its ambassador, whom I saw for a second time. That night, as I later read in the press, a United States task force bound for the Mediterranean was diverted to the Caribbean. I have given these details at great length, since many accusations have been thrown about relating to the time of invitations and consultations. I trust that the facts will assist in the search for the truth.
It led to conflict within the islands of the region because it was felt that this decision was not a decision to be made that way. Guyana felt betrayed. Trinidad felt betrayed because The CARICOM meeting was held, but the OECS meeting decision was made even before CARICOM meeting was held. And so there was no transparency between the leaders. So Forbes Burnham was very annoyed. Chambers was very annoyed. He actually removed his envoy from Barbados. He was that annoyed because there was, you know, they didn't come up front and say, this is what we're going to do.
Next day, Saturday, October the 22nd, I saw Prime Minister Price of Belize, who indicated that he did not wish to participate and could not, in any event, without the consent of the British government, make any military commitment for Belize. I again saw the British High Commissioner and made a fully formal verbal request indicating that a document of invitation would follow. This document was eventually delivered on Monday morning. No reply to the request for assistance was at first received from the United States, but staff and planning talks between a general officer of the United States Marine Corps, a senior officer of the Jamaica Defense Force, and officers of the Regional Security Force were initiated.
They knew that they could not send in their local forces. I mean, in the case of Barbados, you had a defense force. Dominica had abolished their defense force. They just had police. Places like Antigua and St. Kitts and Nevis still had their own little defense force. But it would have been a bloodbath if those local guys from the islands had gone in.
I was informed all through Saturday, October the 22nd and Sunday, October the 23rd, that no decision had been taken by President Reagan, and that although the planning might go forward, no assumption should be made that the United States would agree to take part. Meanwhile, in Port of Spain, the remaining heads of government were informed, and a long and inconclusive debate ensued in the night of Saturday, October the 22nd, until after 2 a.m. on the following morning. I made contact between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning with a number of the heads, and when the meeting later resumed, the subject was apparently not discussed further. Instead, by a majority of 11 to 1, the heads agreed on sanctions against Grenada and agreed to refer a proposal, which was also carried by a similar majority, restructuring CARICOM to include human rights and democracy qualifications and to remove the strict unanimity rule in some areas, to the region's attorneys general for advice on how to effectuate it. The sole dissenter, Guyana, indicated that it would not wish to participate in CARICOM 2.
When they had the emergency meeting, one of the main leaders of CARICOM informed the RMC that those chaps are going to cooperate in the invasion of Grenada. So they were forewarned that invasion was coming, arising out of the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference.
I may mention that my fears, and those of many of my regional colleagues, as to the confidentiality of the Port of Spain meeting were fully realized. It was faithfully reported to the press, and not by the chairman, that the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States were seeking support for a military intervention in Grenada, an act of at least indiscretion, which led directly to the improvement of the defenses of the island. The remainder of the story has, of course, been the subject of news constantly during the past few days. On Monday night, at 10 minutes past 8, the American ambassador attended my residence and read out to me a formal note from President Reagan indicating that the United States would accept the invitation of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and participate in the intervention in Grenada.
The other issue is our Governor General at the time. Sir Paul Scoon's connection is with the UK.
To the foregoing narrative should be added one major theme which ran through all the planning. At all points, it was agreed that the Governor General of Grenada was the only constitutional authority remaining in the country, and the only one who, in addition to any treaty rights which might and did exist, could issue a formal invitation to foreign countries to enter Grenada to restore order. Accordingly, the participating countries had no difficulty in deciding that he should be invested with formal authority as soon as his person should be secured, and this was made a #1 priority at operations level.
He didn't call the Queen or Margaret Thatcher and ask for assistance. Yet, somewhere along the line, there is something signed that says he would like the US to come in. Now, there's a big controversy on that signing. One of the theories is that, of course, when they came in and, you know, he signed the letter after and not before. So why would his help have gone to the US as opposed to, you know, who would have been his, you know, superior at the time? So there's that.
Now that Sir Paul Scoon is safe, I can reveal that by the kind offices of a friendly, albeit non-participating government, his views were sought well before the military operations commenced on the issuing of an invitation to friendly countries to enter Grenada and restore order.
Now, in the literature, you would see there's a school of thought that says that the United States was invited by the OECS. There's another school of thought that says, in fact, the invitation was signed after the United States came in. The history is unsettled. But what we do know is that it was the Cold War, and the United States was intent on reclaiming US power in the world, and Grenada became an easy target for that reclamation of US power in the world.
Resilience of the Spice Isle. I'm Sherwood McCaskey.